Hello there. On behalf of AT&T Business, thank you for joining us for today's Virtual Viewpoints webinar. You're in for quite a treat. Our speakers have an engaging and insightful discussion planned for you. This webinar will be recorded. We'll send you a link with the recording by email within 24 hours. Before we begin, let's go over how to make the most of your experience. Each window on your console is resizable and movable, so feel free to move things around as needed. At the bottom of your screen are tools to enhance your experience. They're customized for each webinar. Options usually include a link to contact us directly and a list of resources for today's webinar. We'll also include links to related webinars if available. We invite you to download these resources or click on the links that you find most useful. Feel free to explore these tools at any time. If you click on them, you'll still be able to view the webinar. Lastly, please take a moment to fill out our survey during or immediately following the webinar. We craft our content with you in mind, so we'd appreciate your feedback. A window will pop up immediately following the webinar, or you can find access to the survey in the toolbar. And now I'll turn things over to our speakers to kick off today's webinar.
Welcome to the Next Level Virtual Care. Our program today has an expert of panels that will talk about the future of senior communities and the revolution needed in these changing times. My name is Monica Stinchula, and I am the Director of Clinical Operations at Constant Companion, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator today. So let's get started and meet our 5 panelists.
Hello, I'm Mark Gray, founder and CEO of Constant Companion.
Gina?
Hi, I'm Gina Beck. I lead business development for senior care with Alexa Smart Properties.
I'm Steve Moran, and I believe that today, mostly people do not want to live in senior living, and it shouldn't be that way. So I run Senior Living Foresight. We're a media platform, sort of like the Huffington Post, except for senior living. And our content includes things like how to make your staff loving, come to work, even with the pay that you're doing. And we also talk about how the latest products and technologies that are available to operators. So we help those and then finally we help those companies tell their story about how they're changing the world.
Thank you, Steve. Carmen?
Hi, everyone. I'm Carmen Franzak. I am the Chief Revenue Officer for Friendship Village Senior Services and the Executive Director for Friendship Village Chesterfield. I'm a nurse by background. I have my master's in health informatics, and I have about 25 years in healthcare, 10 of that in senior living, and have a huge passion for senior wellness and technology.
Great. Thank you. And last but not least, Dr. Patel.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, everybody. My name is Dr. Manish Patel. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Vicor Scientific. We are a vertically integrated company that really looks at options in the healthcare field by advancing that technologically throughout different spaces, whether it be in diagnostics, all the way through therapeutics, and in between, how we can really engage patients better in this really modern era of healthcare.
Thank you. Now that we've met our panelists, we'd like to meet you, our audience. So we have a quick poll question we'd like to start with, and we'd love to hear from you. So here's our question. Which of the following represents you? The first response is, I am part of a senior living community that is interested in using virtual care technology. The second response, I am part of a senior living community actively using senior technology. The third response is, I am a provider of healthcare services who is interested in using care technology at senior communities. The fourth response is, I am a consumer who is interested in the interaction of virtual care options at senior communities. And the last one is, if we didn't get it right, other. So if we didn't represent you on one of the ones before, whether you be a senior community actively using or engaged or interested in it, or you're a healthcare provider like Dr. Patel, or you're a consumer that just wants to know what we're doing these days in virtual care in senior living. So our responses are coming in. This is great. I'll give you a few more seconds to weigh in. We have a great program for you today. So we'd really like to hear who's listening to us so that we can target we can tailor our comments to what you need the most. So it looks like we've done pretty well. Let's see our results. Wow, most of you are healthcare providers looking to see what is happening in care technology in senior communities. That's great. Oh, I guess we have a lot of others too. So maybe you can send us questions and we can understand better who you are that's listening to us today. So thanks for participating in that. Today, more than ever, healthcare workers and caregivers are stressed out, burnt out, and getting out. However, today's technologies have the power to transform when, where, and how care is delivered. Each of our panelists is going to share information on their experience from the past, what they see now, and what they expect in the future for virtual care. So let's get started. And Carmen, I would like to start with you. You represent the boots on the ground. Can you tell us what you've seen and where you're going with virtual care in your facility?
Sure. We really started on the journey of virtual care because we want to position ourselves to be the best place to live and the best place to work in St. Louis. This technology really has helped us with our value proposition, which is to live well longer. It helps our staff to know we're committed to helping them be as efficient as they can be with their time and to make their workplace as enjoyable as it can be. For our residents, their goals are the same as ours, and that's really to stay in the lowest level of care as possible and to stay in independent living as long as possible.
Thank you. Steve, on to you. You're a big advocate for improving the senior living industry. Based on your work at Senior Living Foresights, what initially sparked your interest in virtual care technology in caregiving for seniors, and what challenges are you seeing for the industry?
So it's a great question, and I think the thing you're going to hear from me over and over again, Monica, is that it's all about people. So any technology, anything really that helps people have better lives, and that when I look at it, that's not just the residents, it includes the team members, it includes the family members. And so, particularly in the face of the pandemic, we already knew technology was really, really important for senior living. But with the pandemic coming on, all of a sudden we had people who were isolated in their rooms, trying to figure out how to keep them safe, how to create a great experience. And so virtual care technology just became a natural fit. And we've seen some amazing improvements. And as much growth as we've seen in the last couple of years, there's so much more coming. I'm really, really excited about what's happening today and what's still to come in the future.
Great. Thank you for that. Dr. Patel, let's go to you. In searching for solutions for senior communities, what technologies have you identified that you need at your company?
I think that's a really important question because it's interesting when you say my company. On one side, I work as the chief medical officer for a company. On the other side, I see a lot of senior patients. Right. And so from that standpoint, as Steve was talking about, the pandemic really opened up a world view of where we are and really told me how behind we are technologically in medicine, where everybody else is accelerating well ahead of us. And we have some barriers we'll discuss later, but really, we needed to know, in order to get to the senior community, what we found was we needed affordable and reliable access through the internet. It had to be dependable. They needed to have the technology in their own hands. Do they have a smartphone? Do they not? Do they have a computer? Right? These were access points. And then how can we make it better for them? It's not just good enough to communicate, but can we engage them further after the visit? Can we have ways to remind them, take your medicine, you have an appointment coming up, do your exercises, et cetera, all in a way that the government sees from a regulatory standpoint compliant. We wanted to engage, and additional to that, one of the most important things we saw during the pandemic is, do we have emergency response capabilities?
Right.
Can we engage emergency response through GPS, through video, through any other access point? How do we get there? Because if we could do the amazing things we do on the internet today already, we need to catch up to it in medicine and through the regulations and everything else.
Thank you. Thank you. You make important points there. Gina, could you tell us a little bit about your journey? I mean, you've been with Oates, you've been with so many CDW, you've been with so many different organizations, and you really know technology. What do you see as the challenges that these communities are facing that you're addressing in your work at Amazon?
It's crazy. It's been over a decade since I've actually engaged with aging in tech issues and needs. And when we first entered this world, there was no Wi-Fi. I think I'm very aligned with Dr. Patel's comment about, making sure you have access and it's affordable. And I think that's still a huge challenge. And it also pays into the whole adoption problem that we see. I think what we learned during the pandemic and as we're going through the pandemic is that older adults will adopt the technology. What we need to do better is that we have to figure out how to make this a sustainable adoption and also provide them the right kind of support. And that has to do with obviously the right kind of technology. And I joined Amazon about a year ago around their Alexa smart properties, which is the Alexa for enterprise technologies, to actually focus on creating an easier, simpler solution so that we can see more older adults grab voice technology. And it wasn't because we pushed it, it actually pulled. So older adults showed us that they not only adopt voice technology, but they really like it and they really need it. And so I think that's what we're starting to see in the evolution of tech.
Thank you for that. We've seen a similar experience at Constant Companion, and that's why I'm going to turn to Mark next. Similar question to you, Mark. I know the Constant Companion, we provide voice and video solutions for senior communities, just like Gina's talking about. What needs have you identified that we need to be addressing today when it comes to our senior communities? And where are we going in the future with that?
Sure. Well, I love working with Gina and the folks at Alexa Smart Properties. They're a fantastic partner, and everybody loves Alexa. She's fun to talk to. The things that we have learned from our partnerships in senior communities is three things. One is they want to be able to have really easy to use communication across campuses, whether it's staff to residents or vice versa. If residents just want to know what's for lunch, what time is it, or to get, calendar information, it really lifts a burden to have a really modern intercom, if you will. Voice technology does that easily. The second thing is, especially during quarantine, we've all seen the images on the national news of people isolating in senior communities, pressed at the window, wanting to see loved ones, that sort of thing. So the ability to do what we're all doing right now, have video communication with family, to be able to do a visit that is super easy without people getting on planes or, having to deal with quarantine issues. So that was really huge. The other thing that I've learned is a pain point in senior communities everywhere is the staff is stressed. You mentioned it in your opening remark. And we found that a little fun, simple wearable device for the staff, it reminds me of Star Trek. They would click on the communicator to beam up, Scotty. We've equipped staff with wearable voice technology that integrates with the bedside technology. So it's one big connected campus, and there is more smiles, instant communication and response to questions, and less miles of walking to go find out what someone needs with perhaps a pull cord or something. So those were the things that we've learned.
Thank you, Mark. All five of you have answered, even though we're here to talk about technology, but you really talked about the humanity that we need to integrate into technology. So Mark has already teed it up, but let's talk about these barriers to care that we're seeing. So I'm sure you've seen some barriers, and we're all trying to overcome them right now, as you said, with the pandemic, with the lockdowns and everything else. So let's spend a few minutes discussing these barriers. And I'd like to start with you, Steve. From what you are seeing in the industry, can you speak about the barriers to accessibility and inclusion of seniors with the use of technology?
So the barriers are I think the biggest barrier comes back to almost the human factor, that it's a little bit, for being a senior living resident is a little bit like being on a jury. If you've ever been on a jury, they give you this speech about how you're the most important part of what happens in the courtroom, and then they have all these rules that they have about what you can and can't do, and you can't ask questions and you can't talk. Too often that happens with residents and with their families, is they're not actually asked, and nobody actually steps back. And it's really tough. There's so much technology out there and trying to figure out the right choice, and it's a big investment. And so operators end up in kind of this freeze mode. But at the end of the day, the technology all has to be based on what actually is better for residents, what gives them a better experience. And Mark, I love this idea of this communicator on the shoulder for team members, because team members spend so much time running and doing things that is not very efficient. And you want to be able to use that technology so they can actually do the really, really important human stuff. And one more thing, we're sort of slow to adopt, right? I mean, the budget bottom end motels had pervasive Wi-Fi before many senior living communities. So, but I think mostly it's a mindset.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks. Gina, Steve made some points that I think that you're going to dovetail on, because what do you see as the biggest barrier to using Alexa Smart technology in properties?
Yeah, no, Steve and I are also aligned. I think when he says the word that senior living is slow to adopt, there's an old saying that healthcare is about 10 years behind the world, and senior care is about 10 years behind healthcare. So yes, they are the slowest ones to adopt. And with that being said, though, I am going to challenge this notion. I think the adoption problem inside of senior care oftentimes doesn't stem from the older adult. I do think that there's a lot of projections that happen, and particularly, and I used to work at Emeritus Brookdale Senior Living, so being firsthand in that world, I saw that the biggest, I would say, objection to adopting technology happened to be the associates and the staff. They felt that adding extra technology was too much of a burden. It was not easy to deploy. And oftentimes the big picture on what this looks like is often left behind. And so I think that's going to be really important to understand. And yeah, and Steve, you can definitely add more if you want to amplify my comment.
Right. You're talking about, this is about culture, right?
Correct.
The one thing I would just add to this, Monica, is I was at a conference a few years ago where they had a panel of residents, and the big question was, what are you using? And the expectation was they were going to talk about dumbed down tablets and senior specific stuff, or senior phones. And to a person from the 70 something to the 90 something, they were using exactly the same technology. And so Gina, you are 100% right about the perceptions rather than the reality.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you. Dr. Patel, let's bring you into this conversation. Can you give us an example or two of what your company has seen about the barriers facing senior communities?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to take it from a different approach. I think Gina and Steve brought the perspective of the resident. But we have to remember, because as Gina mentions, medicine is 10 years behind technology, and senior care might be even 10 years behind that. There's reasons for it. And a diverse panel like this has to be engaged to deal with that. And that's called the government. Okay? We all have to take, while technology can be adopted at multiple levels, telecommunications can be brought out via multi-state capabilities. But let me give you the barriers that we face in order to deliver that care, and that's reimbursement. What is multi-state telehealth licensure? What are the HIPAA and security concerns? What about medical malpractice? fraud and abuse? How do we do controlled substance prescribing across telemedicine platforms? And then ultimately, a hospital system like mine, or you look at a private practice person, how do you pay them?
Right.
You know, so all of this, if there's no options to be paid by CMS, then all of a sudden all win, and what do you end up with? 20 years ago medicine still, right? And so I think we have a lot to overcome, and we have to do it from multiple viewpoints. It can't just come from the medical doctor. I think it has to come from advocates like Steve, corporations like Gina represents, technology advancements like Constant Companion, and the facilities. You know, so across all of that, we have to have it. And I think Carmen can speak to what the facility conditions are, but that's where I will tell you we need to engage as a group.
Thank you. You make a very important point there. If it's not reimbursed, where are the funds going to come from? And that leads us to you, Carmen. So how do you do that? I mean, you have your staff and residents, and they want to experience technology. How are you paying for it?
Sure. Well, let me step back just a second and say, certainly from the senior living perspective, the other presenters touched on it, but if there's any silver lining at all in the pandemic, it has been that it was much easier to push technology forward because residents, families, employees, everyone acknowledged the importance of it due to isolation. And so any silver lining at all, that would be it. As far as us paying for it, sure, we're receiving zero reimbursement for it, but we had the luxury of building it into our budget for the following fiscal year. And so we were able to add it on to the monthly service fees for our resident, very small amount, and pay for all the technology in its entirety. So that helped us be able to take it on in a already hard financial times anyway for senior living. I'm sure everyone has budget constraints just like we do, but we really did build it into the budget. As far as barriers and the way that we've been able to implement the technology, though, I think the most important piece for us was that from the very top level, our CEO to myself, all the way through the leadership team, we all understood the importance of this and really bought into the success of it and committed ourselves to it. Therefore, our teams did the same. Residents, you might think it would be hard for them to use the technology, but if they have a voice, they can use it. And, they certainly had a lot of family members pushing for them to use this technology as well. So that was very helpful. And then partnering with a company like Constant Companion, who really helped us deploy all of the technology and is still engaged with us on a weekly basis on how do you take the technology to the next level, how do residents use it for different tips and tricks. And so they've really stayed a strong partner with us through this year-long implementation that we've had.
Thanks, Carmen. And it's good to hear that you turn barriers into opportunities. And I love that. I love that. I think that's very powerful. Mark, now on to you. According to Statista, about 40% of people 65 and over do not own a smartphone. Mark, what have you seen as the biggest barriers to seniors using technology if they're not using the ubiquitous smartphone today?
Mm-hmm. So I think as we look at barriers for all seniors using technology and particularly for senior communities, which is our focus here today, I think one of the things is been touched on has been the privacy, security, compliance. That's been a big opportunity for us to help provide solutions that do that. So we have been able to anonymize and make, smart speakers HIPAA compliant and to meet those stringent tests for government, as Dr. Patel was talking about. But we also want to make it fun. We want to make it easy. And we think of ourselves as a technology company, but I really think what we do and what other good system integrators need to be as partners to facilities like Carmen's is we're about 80% training and 20% technology. We love the people process. It's all about people. And our to Steve's point earlier, it's a misnomer, and Gina's comment as well, that older adults can't learn to use technology. Nothing could be further from the truth. Our oldest power user is 101 years young and is very active with voice technology. And our number one power user last quarter was 86 years young in West Virginia. And he talks to Alexa, Gina, 72 times per day on average. Now, look, I'm in the business and I don't talk to Alexa 72 times a day, but he's bedbound and he can turn lights off and on, lock doors and unlock, see who's at the door by video, and can change his thermostat. He's regained a lot of personal power by using voice technology. Voice is very inclusive like that. So I think the third thing is staff. If you really do a great job of winning over the hearts and minds of staff and the team at assisted living, that this is going to be fun, it's going to be useful, it's going to help them with their job and de-stressing a very tough time to be in caregiving, they just love it. They get excited. We often gift smart speakers to the staff members when they check out on a little simple how to use it stuff, so they can take it home and bring entertainment and education to their family. All of a sudden, they're excited. Look, did you know it can do this? And did you know it can do that? So anyway.
That's terrific. Both you and Carmen, this is a great way to end this segment, is both of you are turning those barriers into opportunities. And to the point of our other three panelists, you're also dispelling the myths about what seniors will do with technology. So this is terrific. So we're going to go back to an audience poll. So audience, if you would, weigh in here. We want to hear from you. Please predict what will be the next big impact on adoption of virtual care technology. Will it be A, the need for increased virtual video connection with family and friends? B, easy to use technology and telehealth equipment? C, the use of artificial intelligence, AI, to increase engagement, decrease isolation and loneliness? D, improve efficiency for senior community staff and supplement care? Or E, all of the above? Tell us what you think. I think you've heard opinions on all of these issues so far from our panelists, but what is it that, in your mind, what is the most important barrier to adoption of virtual care technologies for seniors? Oh, we're getting a great response. I'll give you a few more seconds to chime in here. All right, you laggers, we need you on here. And let's see what our results are, if you would, please. Wow, it's all over the board, but most people believe it's all of the above. And I think from what you're hearing from our speakers today, I think they would agree with you. So let's dive even deeper into this. We know that virtual care technology has the ability to positively affect each of these areas and even more. So let's talk about the future of virtual care. So panelists, please pull out your crystal balls and look into the future as we talk about the senior community revolution and the technologies and innovations that are driving it. Mark, we're going to start with you this time, go in the opposite order. Mark, when you think about the social determinants of health, how do you see technology helping to address the demands in senior communities?
Well, I think for a lot of people, we've gotten a lesson in the past 2 years, regardless of your age or where you live, of what loneliness, isolation, or even a little bit of depression can feel like, because we were quarantined. We were, either you were living with your spouse 24/7, 365, you're going, oh my gosh, this is a lot, or you were alone. And people found out we need each other. We need community. We need connection. It's so important to everyone, but it really impacts healthcare in measurable ways. So it's not just a nice to have, it is a must have, feeling engaged and connected. And voice technology does that many ways. One, it's fun throughout the day. You can be engaged with it. But number two, I love doing my family video call every Sunday afternoon with my mom and dad. They're in their mid 80s. We've been doing it for years. We have a ritual every Sunday at 5 o'clock. and we all look forward to it. They can't wait for that call. And people can do that in senior communities. They do that, whether you have specialized hardware, you can even get the application on your smartphone to communicate with someone that has the right devices. So I really think that's important. But here's what we learned, especially in the past 2 years. After about 8 weeks with a smart speaker device, people kind of develop a little friendship with the voice assistant. It's not just to talk to their family. They like to talk to Google, Siri, and especially Alexa. I'm not just saying that because Gina's here. Alexa's very engaging and chatty. And people just kind of get, they feel like they got a little roommate that moved in with them. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you, Mark. Well, Gina, to you, what's in your crystal ball? What do you see as the future of virtual care?
Well, first of all, I do have to comment that Constant Companion, the name, obviously is appropriate based on all the stories that Mark has shared earlier. So I can see why they would look at that companion. And I think it really has to do with, when we talk about the future, I have to say that at the end of the day, one of the leadership principles at Amazon has to do with customer obsession. And because of Amazon's customer obsession, it was actually older adults that brought Alexa to our attention to say, hey, we can do something more with Alexa. And not can we do more, but we can grow and engage. And I think Mark said this, it's empowering. And so voice, I believe, is the future. Voice with AI, a smart voice that can support us to ease just everything that we do. With this workforce shortage that we're upon, there's a ton of things that we need to do to optimize and be more efficient. And using Alexa-empowered voice in so many use cases could really transform that experience inside that community, and it can transform the experience inside the home with aging. So I think there's such a huge opportunity, and we are just in the beginning. We're just scratching the surface.
Oh, I agree. And I look forward to building more of that. Back to your point about AI, I think the more that we learn and the more that we can adjust to the changing conditions of the seniors that we're serving, the greater the adoption as well, because we grow with them, which is really fun for all of us and rewarding. Carmen, on to you. What's your vision for technology and virtual care at Senior Village? What do you want to see through your crystal ball?
So I think we've just started to touch on it. Similar to Gina, I feel like it's going to explode and just continue to grow. I think for us, it will begin to replace some of the antiquated systems that we still use today in senior living, like daily check-ins with our residents, nurse call systems, printed activity calendars, and so on. It will continue to make the lives of our residents and employees better. And most importantly, I think our future customer, the future senior moving into senior living, is going to come to expect this technology. And it will just be a part of the normal move-in process for us. My goal really is that each resident here will allow it to live up to its name, Constant Companion, like we've talked about, or feel like each resident has their own assistant. So that's why we're teaching them more and more skills with it every day.
That's terrific. Steve, Carmen just made a point that I hope that you're going to build on. And she said the future resident is going to expect this kind of technology. Is that your expectation too when you look into the future?
Absolutely. So I am at that decision-making generation. My father's 93 years old, and I don't know whether he's listening or not, but Dad, you should be in a senior living community like what Carmen has. He's a little far away for you, Carmen, but I think that it would be a go or no go for me. And I sort of already touched on the areas that I think are really, really important. A couple things I want to add is I think that wellness is going to become a much bigger piece of this. How do we use technology to not maybe just slow down the process of aging, but how do we actually use it to reverse the aging? How do we make it simpler? Somebody, Carmen or Gina, one of you talked a little bit about this whole, the check-in thing. How do we make that automatic so somebody doesn't have to walk the halls with little knocker things? And AI, we have so much data right now. I'd love to have a conversation with you, Carmen, about the data. I'd love to have a conversation with you, Mark, about all this data that you're collecting, but we don't really know what to do with it yet. And I think it can teach us so much about how to better serve residents. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to this human thing. How do we make it so people have better experiences with residents, with their family members, with the outside world?
Thank you. I agree with you 100%. We are going to expect this. Our generation is going to expect this kind of experience. And you're right, the wellness and those kind of changes will be an important part of senior communities that we'll want to live in as we age. Mark, I'm coming back to you. Based on what you've learned working in senior communities, what advice would you give an organization interested in adopting voice and video technology?
Well, I would start with the question of what is your technology strategy for your community? And as Karma was talking about, people are arriving and moving in with smart devices. They're coming in on average. I hear stories of 3, 4, even 5 devices per resident. So starting with the infrastructure, as Dr. Patel was talking about, to have the right and ample amounts of Wi-Fi and access points that are load balanced and smart. So you're kind of future-proofing your campus a bit by not just investing in technology, but doing it in a smart way. So I would recommend getting a technology partner, a systems integrator in your area. We do that for folks, but we also introduce people to great resources in their local area that we know are high quality, and we don't charge a penny for it. We just love to connect good people to other good people because we're here to be of service, and we're not going to do it all. What I really think that matters most is integrating your goals and your existing legacy technology with what you need to add to it, and in a plan that sort of becomes part of your investment in your infrastructure and real estate that's going to make you very competitive and grow your census, grow your occupancy rate, grow a waiting list, because you have all this and everybody wants to be there.
That's exactly what we want, Mark. That is what we're looking for in senior living in the future. Thank you for that. It reminds me of how they built Margaritaville and everyone took to it right away. It's the experience that people wanted. I see the same thing happening with technology when it comes to senior communities in the future. So let's do it. We have one more poll question we'd like to get the audience involved with again. So get ready, audience. Now that you've heard the stories about new technologies and virtual care that are being used in senior communities, do you feel that virtual care technologies will become the standard in senior communities? I think we stacked the deck on this one. Absolutely, most likely, maybe, absolutely not, or I don't know. Weigh in, audience, if you would, please. We'd love to hear from you. Do you think this is part of the future when it comes to senior living? I think when I end up in a senior facility, I'm going to go with my 88-inch TV and my Oculus thing and everything else and I'm going to play video games all day long. So I will be the nightmare resident with all of our technology. But what about you, audience? What do you think? Do you want to see this in the future? And, we're having a great response this time. Let's see what it is. Like me and like everyone that's on this panel, absolutely, that this technology will become a part of the future. This is the future of senior care in senior communities. So I'm glad we have some agreement here in our audience. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the last part of our presentation, and I want each of you panelists to give us a takeaway, something that our audience really needs to understand about the use of virtual care in senior communities and the future of virtual care in senior communities. Gina, can we start with you, please?
Yeah, so and then I think it's important with virtual care, and I've read a lot about this. One of the key takeaways is that we know that older adults will adopt virtual care, but what we have learned that can be improved is simplified technologies and support around that. And usually a barrier to the technologies has to do with security and privacy. So I want to make sure a key takeaway is that, at least from an Alexa smart properties, that we do not keep any recordings, no data, all the things that people are most worried about. And I think once you can overcome that fear, then you can start to enjoy the beauty of how easy using voice or any kind of virtual care technologies can impact your life. And I think what I've seen from the data is that we've kind of halted virtual care across the country. Part of it has to do with they say, oh, well, we can go in person. Well, we have Omicron, and that's not necessarily the case. So what it'd be really important to see is how do we keep increasing that virtual care engagement, virtual resident engagement, and again, voice is the future.
Thanks, Gina. Great words of wisdom. Steve, on to you. What is your key takeaway for our audience?
I think that technology is with us and it's going to continue to grow in importance. The big challenges, of course, are which technology, the right technology. One of the things I really love about Constant Companion is that it's got a very integrated system. And integration, when I talk to operators, it's all these systems. There's something here and something there. It's expensive and it doesn't talk to each other. And so I think that integration part is going to continue to be really, really important. But it's here and it's growing and it's going to make it better. I know that it'll be like crazy cool. Well, Monica, maybe we'll be living next door neighbors in a community someplace, right? And so I am really, really excited about it. I think there are a couple things, though. I think that ultimately it's all about people, right? How do we make the lives of team members better? How do we make it a better place to come to work? How do we make it easier to connect with other human beings? And I think as we do this, we've got to be talking to leaders of these senior living organizations. So we're talking about what the technology really does. So we're not just selling them something that looks cool, feels cool, is snazzy, but actually doesn't do anything, or in some cases actually makes the burden on residents and team members tougher. Because it's all about telling a story of this technology that changes the world and showcases what's really happening in our oldest, most vulnerable people.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. Carmen, on to you. What's your key takeaway for our audience? You have a unique perspective being in a senior community presently. So what is it you want people to take away from your words today?
Yeah, I think for senior living communities, I would say do it now. Start investing in the proper resources so you can do it. Get buy-in, and that buy-in really comes from you can still be high touch and be high tech also. So we're not trying to replace any people or the great care that we deliver. We just want to enhance it. Like I said earlier, I think take advantage of your budget season, whenever that is. Try to build it into your fees so it's not so hard to financially be able to do this. If you're a senior living organization trying to move to a senior wellness organization like we are, this is certainly a key part of it. This is a must do. And also, I think it's a great tool that you'll be able to use in your sales process to recruit your future residents, but also when you're trying to recruit future employees.
Right. Very good point. Very good point. I like that. High touch and high tech. Thank you for that very much. It's a great takeaway. Dr. Patel, on to you. You know, you represent the providers in this conversation. What's your key takeaway for our audience today?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I represent providers, but apparently I got my AARP card sent to me too. So I crossed the barrier into senior living. But, you know, I look at senior living this way, that it's not just indwelling communal skilled nursing assisted living. I mean, in my mid 50s, I'm looking at active living centers for seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And those are everywhere. And for me, as many of the panelists said, if I have to go there, I want access to high-end Wi-Fi. I want the ability to connect to my doctor. So forget that I'm a doctor. I want to be able to talk to my own doctor in a way that doesn't take me time to go to the office for no reason. So really improve that access. And we're seeing that across the board. I had a very interesting conversation talking to a planner for senior active living communities. And that individual said, yeah, products like Constant Companion are the first level. They're taking it to the next level currently. But what about, hey, Mark? I always put this kind of pressure on Mark. What about giving me the metaverse here as well? I want my voice-activated metaverse.
There we go.
So,
And Mark,
hey, I'll take
that's
step one.
oh yeah, Mark, that's a perfect segue on to you. What's your key takeaway for our audience?
I think today what we're seeing is rapid adoption of voice technology and a voice and video connected senior community keeps everyone, staff and residents, more engaged, connected, and protected 24/7. So it's just a wonderful byproduct to have a little virtual concierge bedside in every single resident's room. That's really what it is, instant on 24/7. I think in the future, you're going to see those with the technologies we're talking about today are going to be full with a waiting list. And we have many, many senior communities who, for the first time in their many years of operation, have gone from having vacancies to being 100% full with a waiting list when they became a voice and video connected campus. The adult children realized, I'm actually going to see my mom or my dad or my loved one more with them moving in here than if they stay at home, because they have all this support and technology. And I think there's a future where there are virtual assistants that use that data to create actionable intelligence, not to replace humans, as Carmen was talking about, but to make the humans smarter so we deliver next level virtual care.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for that. All right, we're on to our question and answers, and boy, the questions are coming in. And the first one is for you, Gina. One of the biggest complaints I hear from residents is they can't add skills to their resident Alexa device. If they can't customize it, why should they be motivated to use it?
Well, that's a great question. So the question has to be, is that device a regular consumer Alexa device, or is this a device that is managed by Alexa Smart Properties? Either or, if it's Alexa Smart Properties, someone like a Constant Companion would be able to add those skills that are public onto the device. But there is an extensive certification security protocol that we actually put in to ensure that anything that gets added to a resident device is actually properly vetted. If it's a consumer device, they should still be able to access the skills to add on. So I have to better understand if it's a consumer or an Alexa Smart Property solution.
Thank you. Maybe we'll hear more from Abby, who asked the question, and she can clarify that for us. But I think you make an important point, Gina, that it is about connectivity and also security at the same time. Okay, on to our next question.
Monica, if I may, I think one of the biggest aspects in looking at Constant Companion myself and knowing patients who have it, it is very approachable to the senior to really customize it to them. So if there is a barrier that somebody's noticing, it may just be that they haven't learned how to engage the device fully themselves, to program it, if you will.
Right. That's a good point. Thank you for that. Mark, I'm going to ask you this next question, but if anyone else wants to chime in, please just raise your hand. I'll call on you as well. It is very difficult for me as a service provider case manager to separate the needs of senior care from those of who are developmentally delayed, developmentally disabled, living in an independent living setting as well. Could someone share their thoughts based on my observation? Is there a difference between developmental delays in living in residential care and senior care? Is there a difference?
We've just been given a contract for one of the large insurance payers to work with population health, including a segment, a pretty good size population of developmentally delayed. In our journey to here, we've seen those, for example, Monica, who have early stages of dementia and Alzheimer's, be very, very excited to learn to use voice technology and to have Alexa to come back to them with repetitively, what time is it? Even if they ask 25 times in a row, Alexa is always patient and always happy to answer and never gets annoyed with them. So I think that there are big discoveries in the topic, and I know you care very passionately about this as well, in mental health and in having the right solutions for that person. One other thing I can say for your audience member who's asking the question is we can set up routines. We can set up routines that are customized for that individual that helps address certain issues. They might get agitated around 5 or 6 o'clock. We call that sundowner syndrome. And by simply automating their favorite music to come on or their favorite shows to come on, oh my gosh, it just changes their day. And people get very excited about having a routine that they love and know and like and trust, and they kind of get upset when you take it away. So that would be a starting point, but I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you make a good point. And those routines can also work with activities of daily living for people living in independent living facilities that have developmental delays. So there are many ways that we can use this with different populations. Thank you for that answer. Dr. Patel, I'm coming to you with the next question. I saw the hospital at home presentation yesterday, and I was wondering how the hospital at home model would work in senior living. You're on mute.
My apologies. That's a great question. It's what we're trying to figure out throughout healthcare right now is to really figure out what's the most efficient way and best way to take care of patients. And interestingly, at a recent panel that I was on, everybody was complaining about the computer and getting apps and this and that. And I happened to mention, what about voice recognition? What about the ability for somebody to utilize voice recognition to help them engage quickly? And all the lights, went on in everybody's head. And what we're seeing right now is that engagement to take large health systems, as you see growing across the United States, to work with senior care centers and saying, how can we be your provider? So that those senior care centers can now directly engage and contract in with hospital systems to be their care provider. And they could be 50 miles away, but we can provide that specialty care through activated systems like Constant Companion because they're HIPAA compliant, because they're easy to use, because the technology is there that if they don't have the best internet service, we can bring it to them through Constant Companion. So that's the benefit, and that's how we're seeing it go.
Right, and that also comes back to that earlier point you made about government regulation and reimbursements as well. I mean, when we start doing, the consults and everything else using virtual technology with people in nursing homes, the benefits to the residents of not moving them to have that consult done, it's probably
it's
invaluable.
A huge cost saving. It's a huge cost savings to the system too, because that cost of transportation has to be paid by somebody or somewhere. Right. And if it's in the CMS system, all of a sudden you've eliminated that massive cost of transport, and here you are right in their backyard with them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The next question is for Steve. Steve, can you give some examples of how virtual care technology is being used to supplement the caregiver workforce shortage in senior communities?
Sure. I think at the sort of at the most basic level, it means not having to run back and forth to communicate. Things like calendars, or we have a family friend who moved into an assisted living community in the Midwest, and she was talking to my wife And she said, man, it's the greatest thing. They gave me this little button that I wear around my neck. I don't think it was one of your devices, Mark, I'm sorry to say, but this button, and every time I need something, I just push the button and somebody comes and opens my windows and closes my windows and all those things. And so I think that ability to get help when you need it is really basic. But there's so much opportunity to just create this human connection using technology and voice. Gina, I love what you and Amazon is doing. The ability to talk as people have trouble with their sight and with hearing. It's probably the thing that will continue to be the most revolutionary part of technology from at least a resident perspective.
Thanks, Steve. I have to agree with you on that. And Carmen, a question for you. When people are considering moving into an assisted living community, how often do they ask about technology in the community now versus even just 2 years ago? How frequently did this conversation come up from potential residents and families?
Yeah, I think it comes up way more often now just because of the isolation that occurred during the pandemic, and especially during the beginning of the pandemic and all the horrific stories we heard out there about individuals being isolated from their families. So it's certainly even more important now than it's ever been. And again, I'll go back to the sales process. It is something that we use in every sales presentation that we do. Anything from showing them how we can program a daily reminder for their mom to call them each day if they want that, or how their mom can just say, call the concierge and get anything that they need. So it's become very, very important for us.
That's terrific. I love hearing that. As a social worker, nothing warms my heart more than using technology to create those connections on a more consistent basis. And I'm sure, to Mark's point earlier, there's more interaction between people now than having to do that visit that maybe only happened on one Sunday or maybe holidays. And now they can be together more frequently using technology, which is great. Thank you. Mark, I want to come back to you. And I want to come back to you to talk about what AT&T is doing. AT&T has opened up this public sector, it's called FirstNet, and it's really cool. I mean, it's the kind of interoperability we've all wanted in the healthcare field for a long time. And they're using a lot of virtual technology. Are you doing any work with them on this? And where do you see that going in the future? Mark?
Mark, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. FirstNet. There we go. So FirstNet was awarded as a contract to AT&T by Department of Commerce years ago, and it's a powerful network, Monica. What it does is it sets a very powerful bandwidth aside for first responders, police, fire rescue, EMTs, any type of first responders. And during times of natural disaster, if there is fire, earthquake, where there's going to be hundreds or thousands of calls to 911, it creates a bandwidth so that FirstNet never goes down. You're not going to be busied out because of traffic and congestion on the network. So we're proud to work with AT&T. They've been a fantastic partner for us in terms of providing very, very excellent connectivity, especially in rural markets where sometimes you don't have that good 4G and 5G connection. But what we rely on in our call for help feature, where people can get access for help 24/7 with just their voice using smart speakers, is knowing that those first responders are going to be fast and be able to get there quickly because they've got that AT&T FirstNet infrastructure 24/7.
That's terrific. That's terrific. And with all of the weather problems we've been having, that's a real blessing for us all to have here in this country. Well, our time is up, and we could continue on with this topic for a long time. But I want to thank our speakers for doing this today. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure having this conversation. And thank you, audience, for joining in today. And for now, I say goodbye.